Welcome. Good morning. I'm Alan Fruzzetti. So most of us have had a chance to meet last night, and a few folks weren't able to come last night. And welcome to you as well. Just a tiny little bit of history to orient us to the Family Connections program. We started the Family Connections program, I don't remember, 2002, so a little more than 10 years ago, and started actually, I think the first training was here, actually in this room, wasn't it? And was not something we were sure where it was going to go, but now I think we've got Family Connections going in, I think, 16 countries, and people from most American states have participated one way or the other at some point in time, as well as having our Family Connections available in a conference call or Skype kind of version. So we're really excited about the growth of Family Connections and very grateful to people like you who are willing to take and provide Family Connections to the many thousands of families that could benefit from it. Just a word of background as well. You know, Perry used to work in this facility running a DBT program here, and also started, I think, the first multifamily group using DBT principles. And I was in Reno, Nevada, where I'm a professor at the university there, and was independently. We didn't know each other. This was now 15 years ago or so, maybe more, actually a little more. And I was also very interested in working with families of people who were suicidal, self-harming, and the kinds of folks that we often call borderline personality disorder. And Marsha Linehan, who knew us both, I'd worked in Marsha's clinic for 4 years as a graduate student. I got my master's degree and PhD at the University of Washington, and I worked in her clinic and knew Marsha well. And Perry knew Marsha. She said, you know, why are you two doing this independently? You should work together. So Perry, of course, it takes, as you probably know, it takes possibly up to a second for Perry to phone you when she hears about that kind of thing, and so less than a second later, Perry is phoning me, I think, because I don't think this was before we had email, and we got together, and of course we've been on the same page ever since. And so I pretty much do what Perry tells me to do. I have learned in our NEA family that's an extremely effective way to go along. Not because there's any bad consequence if I don't, but because Perry's ideas are fantastic. And she also knows everyone in the world. I don't know how she does that. So, and so Perry has been just absolutely instrumental at getting this out everywhere. And, you know, we talk about family connections. It's not just family connections. Perry connects everybody to everybody else. And so, you all know this because you know Perry. So anyway, that's just a little background. Since then, we've gone on and done a couple of studies. I'll show you a little data this morning. It's been independently replicated by another group of researchers that we don't even know. We didn't even know they were doing it, and saw it published, said, oh, fortunately they got good results too. This is, in fact, as far as we know, the only evidence-based program, and it's a program. It's not treatment. It's a program. It's a community-based grassroots program for family members of suicidal and self-harming people. As far as we know, it's the only one in the world like that. So we're very pleased about it. It's always evolving. So you've got in front of you, just to start orienting, you've got a binder, and in the binder on top you'll see the slides. The slides that you've got there are the same ones you're going to see up here, with the exception of a few cartoons that aren't in your slide that I might show. But you've got the slides, and that will be the outline for our weekend together. The slides correspond to the manual, okay? So in a teaching situation like this, where I've got a projector and there's a bunch of people, it makes more sense for us to have something visual, like a slide. And so but the material on the slides will be, although the format's a little different, it's the same material and it follows the same flow as the manual. Now, in a smaller group, you don't get up and talk like I am. You sit around a table, or with or without a table, and you have a few pages that provide your outline for that day. And you've got that manual as well. in a slightly different format than the slides, but it's the same material. You've got the manual. And then you've also got a set of teaching notes, which is a kind of Wikipedia of family connections. The teaching notes are notes that Family Connections leaders have put together that help them augment their teaching. It gives them ideas. Sometimes people scribble down examples that I might have used or somebody else might have used. Let's see. It seems the audio, I'm sorry to interrupt. It says it seems the audio is not connected, but I'm definitely connected. So I don't know. Sam, you have... yeah, but this says it seems the audio is not connected. So let me just say, let's see, Maria and Elisa, is it okay now? Because if you can hear me now, then we'll go forward. Let me know. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now? This is the famous thing, right? Okay. So you've got all these materials. Let me say also that I update the manual every year a little bit. The manual grows, and good morning and welcome. The manual grows as we have new information. You know, this is the National Education Alliance, which we probably have to change to International Education Alliance, but for BPD. And so what that means is that we're all about education, and as we learn new things, the manual changes. It updates with new information. So I try not to do that on a rolling every month basis because it gets too confusing. So about every year, there's a slightly, and it's really just small, they're just small changes to the manual. You'll have access to those things when you lead a group on our website. The most current version of the manual will always be available. Every once in a while, and it's not often, there's enough change that it warrants me, good morning and welcome. There's enough change that warrants me sending out a little explanation. Okay, now in section 2 on page 5, there's a new something, and I would explain it to everybody who hasn't heard that before. But mostly the changes are small, updating numbers or adding a line or a sentence, just to make sure that what we're saying is as accurate as it can be. And as we do further research and maybe develop other things, then the manual will reflect that in small increments, but not big ones. You'll always have access to the most up-to-date manual and the most up-to-date teaching notes on the website. Okay. Now, occasionally somebody wants to use slides in your own group, and if you want to use slides, you're welcome. I can send you these slides. I don't want you to feel like you need to do that. And in some cases, it might get in the way because then it feels more like a lecture than a discussion. But if you're comfortable using it to facilitate the discussion and you want to do that, you're welcome to any of the slides that you're going to see here today. And I actually have thousands more. So there's lots of opportunities for that. Yeah, Perry. Oh, yeah, thanks. So our screen looks a little funny this morning. You see the slide here. This is in a window on the computer so that you see the little thing of me up in the upper right hand. That's because there are folks in other places who are actually participating remotely with this as a live stream. Now, because of the technology at the moment, we only have one microphone for them, so they're only going to hear me. So it's going to be a little tricky, and I apologize to folks out there. I'll try to repeat questions, but there may be times when we just have to have a conversation here in the room, and you just can't do that. So there may be moments when the folks who are remote will miss out on a couple of minutes of something, and we're also recording this, so hopefully there'll be that. So we'll see how that goes. But that's what's going on up here. You can see who's participating. You can see the slide, and if you're tired of looking at me directly, you can look at me up there. Or you can look at something else. That's also a possibility. So, okay. So that's that. Now, so just in terms of how we're going to try to structure our time, there's quite a few of us on the one hand. On the other hand, this isn't that big a room. absolutely can interact. And I want to make sure that as we move along that you ask questions. We're trying to do two things at once that are parallel. I'm going to walk through the Family Connections program in many ways as though we were just doing a Family Connections program together, okay? But at the same time, at moments, I'm going to stop and step out of that and say, now what about what we've just been doing? Do you have questions about how you would teach this, how you would engage a conversation or a discussion around this, and how you would handle certain questions that might come up, okay? And I want to be absolutely clear. Family Connections is a grassroots program. That's what it is. And it's very successful. Our data are terrific, led by people just like you, okay? You know, I've been teaching for 25 years, and I've been teaching families for actually longer, and working as a family therapist and as a DBT therapist for longer. So the idea is not that you have to do this like I do it. Heaven forbid you'd have to do it like I do it. I mean, you're going to do this like you do it, okay? And I just want to be absolutely crystal clear. You're going to develop your own style. The content is the content. You're going to use the manual to guide the I mean, that's got the information. That's got educational information. It's got skills. And you will be your own warm, supportive, and validating person, providing support to your group and modeling that. But you're going to do that in your way, okay? I don't want you to feel in any way like the way that I do anything should tell you how to do it. The content, yeah, sure. I mean, that's the content, but I don't want you to feel like that. And in fact, we're very lucky to have some wonderfully experienced Family Connections leaders, which Marie Paul, everybody wave, Marie Paul, and Ann and Matt Costello in the back, who are really, these are stars, okay? And honestly, any one of them could get up here and lead the weekend and you would love it. So they're great for the content. So any questions you have, obviously direct them to me, but during the breaks and at lunch, they can answer questions about, but also about the nuts and bolts of running things. They're wonderful. So I just want to be clear, our really good data don't come from me leading or Perry leading Family Connections group. They come from you leading Family Connections groups. And so you really have two jobs this weekend. One is to get clear, or at least clearer, on the content of the manual, so you know what you're teaching. You know, we're operating under the old adage of, you know, watch one, do one, teach one. You know, boom, boom, boom. And so so this weekend we're getting you to watch and do, so that you're ready to go teach. So we also think you're very precocious, so which is probably true. So, but ask questions not just about content, things that you're going to have to go teach, but also about like, how would I do that? And you can ask those questions of Perry, me, but also Marie Paul, Ann, and Nat. Very terrific resources. Okay, questions about anything? Meaning of life, you know? This is, yeah, this is a great question. So she's asking, so this is a little different from the NAMI courses, which are, there is a manual and you literally read from the manual. Actually, I'm going to discourage you from reading from the manual because we want this to be more interactive. The manual is not written in a way that it would be very fun to listen to, or very fun really to read, as it's not written as prose, it's written as an outline of discussion points and information points, some of which will be, you know, some of it which are just, you hear it and it's completely clear, others of which will spring forward a discussion. And knowing what's coming informs that discussion. And so you're really empowered. I want you to feel empowered to teach the manual. Again, the content is in the manual, to teach it in a way that's comfortable for you. Having said that, some people like to follow the manual very closely and say, okay, now let's look at the next box and do it that way. And that's fantastic. That's great. And other people have people with the manual in front of them, but also say, okay, now let's talk about blank and maybe start with an example that's not in the manual. And that's very effective teaching also. So you're going to use your own style. I want you to feel empowered this weekend. We trust you, okay? This is important. Obviously, we don't want people going off and doing something else, okay? It's family connections, but in ways that make sense to you, that are beneficial to you. And when you get stuck, it's okay to say, you know, I don't know. I'll find out and let you know next week. And that's what we have, a whole network of resources, which we'll talk about over the course of the weekend. Okay, now one last small principle about the teaching and learning of family connections. Some of you are involved in education. I was impressed by some of the education that people in the room do. And I would love to get your feedback about how to do this in more and more effective ways. A lot of things that are improved in the manual are because people coming to Family Connections training who know more about education than, say, we do, how to educate. We've helped to improve this. But one of the things that we're using is something called spiral learning. Okay? In spiral learning, the idea is that we get to a topic and we talk a little bit about it. We don't have to cover that topic entirely because that topic is going to come up again and again and again in a slightly different context with slightly more sophistication. So what that means is that you have a lot of flexibility. You can talk a lot about the topic the first time it comes up and then a little less later on because you've been thorough in the beginning, or you can talk about it a little bit each time and you've covered it thoroughly over all opportunities, or it comes up in the middle. You know, the first time you talk about it a little, the second time a little, and then you do it more thoroughly later on. You've got the flexibility to do that. The reason that we've constructed it this way is because sometimes, you know, our groups are just different, and sometimes there's a pertinent example right in the room that makes you want to go right after this one of the targets. So maybe we're talking about, let's take validation. Validation is, of course, the most obvious piece here. Validation runs through the manual. It comes up in some ways right away early. It comes up again and again. And then there's a whole module on validation. By the time you get to the module on validation, everybody already knows what validation is, okay? But yet the module starts with what is validation, okay? Now, rather than see that as redundant, which is, I guess, the negative way of talking about spiral learning, see it as different opportunities to talk about it in different ways to help people at different points in their learning. And so the idea is, with validation, for example, you could teach a little bit about it at the beginning, but then maybe there's an obvious example in week 3 where a couple of family members really need some work on validation. And in their examples, in their homework or practice during the week, that's been relevant to them. And so you end up spending a lot of time on validation then. When you actually get to what looks like the core discussion of validation, it's more of a review, and you do it rather quickly, okay? Which is another way of saying, you know, the manual is structured to be done in about 12 sessions, usually about 12 weeks. Sometimes that means that, sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's hard, but don't worry if it seems like you're only halfway through the manual and you're 3/4 of the way through the 12 weeks. You may actually be 3/4 of the way through the manual because you've spent a lot of time on some of the later topics. So when you get to them, they actually go quicker than they did. In my experience, we're going to do the same thing this weekend. That's what we almost always do. It looks like we'll never finish this stuff. We're just never going to finish. But we do, because we've actually, the latter parts go a little more quickly because we've covered a lot of the material that shows up later. But it's also the case that if we miss something, it's right there, front and center for us to make sure we have time on. Okay? So I want you to feel empowered to do this in ways that feel good to you and your co-leaders. Okay, questions about this in general? Yeah. The agenda is that's the manual. We're going to just march our way through the manual with moments out to step out and talk about how to teach what we've just been teaching. That's the whole thing. And of course, we'll have break time and lunch time. This is a program that emphasizes 3 different things. As most of you know, it emphasizes education, skill training, and social support. And so we can provide the education and the skill training, and we can provide the opportunity for social support by bringing people together. And that's, you're up to yourself to get the social support, to give and get that during breaks and so forth. In a real group, that's the same way. People come in as they Gesundheit, as they come in, salud, sorry. And as they come in, there's chit chat, and that's wonderful. That's the social support. And sometimes, you know, you have a break and there's chit chat, and people stick around a little afterwards. There's chit chat. The chit chat is not irrelevant. It's actually people tell us this is an important part of the program, is actually feeling like people care about each other who've had similar experiences. I'll repeat. Oh yeah, microphone. Where is our microphone? Oh, right in front of me. Yeah, let's have you use this. So people can hear you. Hold it closer. No, just closer. There you go. The development of the problems. Yeah, we're going to do that this morning. And it's people, this is the first thing that leaders are often worried about. Well, gee, how do we present this in a way that people don't feel criticized or blamed? And as I think you'll see, this is a model that doesn't have any room for criticism or blame. It's a descriptive model, and it generates, I think that, you know, models are just models, okay? They're just ways of representing things, and as a model, it fits the data really well, and it's absolutely not blaming. And so you'll see as we talk about these transactions, I'm sure we'll spend some time, and I'm sure you'll have questions, and we'll have to walk through it, because that's the most difficult piece of this in terms of understanding. And we put it up front early because we don't want people to feel blamed. We want people to feel understood. And by the way, we're not blaming people, even when, you know, anybody here ever make a mistake as a parent or a partner? Anybody ever do that, you know? Right, so it's not that we don't make mistakes, and sometimes they could even be big mistakes, but there are reasons why we do those things. It's just that the world is full of explanations, and we don't have to be judgmental, and so there's a huge premium all the way through. I said validation is one of the themes. Being non-judgmental is one of our themes. Understanding the reciprocal relationships between family members is another theme, that, you know, what I do affects you, and what you do affects me. Therefore, what I do affects me, and what you do affects you. And so there's a lot of, these are the core themes of the program that come up over and over and over again. Okay, so let's just buckle in and move on. So just jump in with questions and comments and so forth as we go along. We'll try to use the microphone. If I don't think of it, try to remember yourself. But so do you have a comment, Matt? You're just going to run around. Oh, thanks. That's fantastic. Okay, so, all right. Welcome. I should have put that up first. All right. All right. I just said this, that our goals are threefold, right? Our psychoeducation, it's broad psychoeducation, and it's always changing. And it's psychoeducation around emotion dysregulation, which includes suicide attempts, people who are suicidal and self-harming, and other dysregulated behaviors, other dysregulated problems, including just severe and chronic misery that's related to emotion dysregulation. Those people are at great risk for suicide, suicide attempts, drug use, and a host of other problems, not least of which are the family distress that comes out of that. So psychoeducation is a big piece. We start with psychoeducation in the beginning. That's our first module. But then there are bits of psychoeducation all through the program. Okay? And then there are skills. The skills are really two general sets. There are self skills, things that we do that are just for us for our own sake. Individual, I would call self-management. How can I manage myself to be less distressed, to be more content, to act in ways that feel more authentic, that I feel better about afterwards, that are consistent with my goals and values. And those self-management skills actually look a lot like DBT skills. Now, this is not a DBT program, I want to be clear. I've been doing DBT for 25 years. Perry is an excellent DBT therapist and supervisor. And so DBT informs a lot of the skills here. But NEA is not a DBT organization. Family Skills is not a DBT program. It's informed that way because we wrote the program and that's what we know and do. But there are actually other things in here that don't come out of DBT, that come out of family systems work and other work with families. That I would say is DBT compatible, but it certainly isn't DBT. So this is our best shot at an education and skill program that's just good for people in the situations that we live in. So just be clear, and we're not promoting DBT as a treatment in any way, other than the fact that it's got good evidence base. We're promoting any treatment that's got a good evidence base. That's really, and there's a little section on that, we'll talk about that. The other set of skills, of course, are family skills. And a couple of these come out of DBT. They're all compatible with DBT, but others just come out of Perry's and my work with families, and which includes, of course, training and perspectives from other systems of family therapy. DBT is a system of family therapy only because Perry and I have tried to make it that, but that's not where it started. So we've adapted mindfulness skills to what we call relationship mindfulness, or using mindfulness in the relationship. We'll talk a lot about that and practice that. Activation skills, getting your relationship moving in the direction you want it to go. Sounds maybe like a funny thing, but we'll explain it. Validation, we've talked about that. How to listen in a way that we can understand and how to communicate what we understand. And that turns out that has a big impact on the other person. Closeness and acceptance skills, this is not so easy, right? This is when there's something that the other person's doing you really don't like, okay? And it could be you don't like it because it feels obnoxious to you, or could you don't like it because it's dangerous to the other person. There are lots of pieces here. And how to know when to accept, meaning stop trying to change, because sometimes trying to change actually just makes it worse. And then, of course, there's a section we call problem management at the end, which is problem solving and problem management, which is how to, when people are able to talk to each other, how to use the structure of good problem management to move ahead, to actually solve some problems, or tolerate them remaining unsolved. Because sometimes we can't solve them. Sometimes all we can do is manage them. Okay, so those are our skills. And then, of course, there's this increased social support and creating a network of social support around the commonalities that we share. So these are our broad threefold goals of doing family connection. And we have the same goals for this weekend. Okay. Questions, comments? We don't know, by the way, to the extent that Family Connections is helpful to people, we don't know if it's because of the package, all three things, or if one or two of these are contributing more. We don't know. So rather than speculate, we continue to work on offering all three, because the full thing actually has pretty good outcomes. Is very helpful to people. Okay, now, just a little bit, I'm going to tell you just a little bit of data from a recent study that we finished actually in my lab. We did a treatment outcome study comparing two kinds of treatment for suicidal and self-harming young adults. Okay, they had to be 18 to be in our study because we didn't want to have to get family consent. So they're 18 to 25 young adults, about 2/3 women, 1/3 men. Okay, so not a study in which men are underreported. This is actually it looks more like the real world of these kinds of problems. And you can't really, let's see, you can't really see it here. I don't know, why isn't that showing up? It doesn't really show up there either. Huh. It's in the book. Okay. Well, sort of in the book. All right, let me tell you what this graph in my PowerPoint slides look like. I don't know, funny why it doesn't translate. I'm going to put it up for the group for just a second, just because it's... that's what it's supposed to look like. It's prettier there, isn't it? And for you folks online, I apologize. This will just be a... So basically, what we did is we compared psychodynamic psychotherapy, that's the P is the psychodynamic psychotherapy, to DBT for these 18 to 25-year-old suicidal young adults. And now this was an intervention, almost all of these were college students, most of them. And many of them were not, most of them were not living with their families, okay? Most of them were living independently. So, and because of the way it works in my state, a lot of them are not local. So we decided that we couldn't, for research purposes, we couldn't do a lot of family intervention in this particular study. So even though it's totally against my usual way of operating, this was a treatment study almost entirely for the individuals, just for the kids, with really no more than one session for family members when that was possible, and actually most of them didn't even get that. So as you can, and what you need to know is just that actually both treatments worked reasonably well. No thanks. It's like getting cold calls while you're eating dinner, you know. So both treatments worked reasonably well and helpful. DBT was superior on all of the major outcomes, reducing suicidality, reducing depression, actually into the normal range, improving social functioning and social relationships, and just general functioning moved up. Ability to go to school or go to work, those kinds of things went. They were all better in DBT. But what I was interested in was, well, gee, even though we're only treating the individual, what's happening in the family, and how is that affecting, right, this reciprocal idea? The individual is getting treatment. How is that affecting his or her parents? And how does that come back and affect the kid? Okay, makes sense? And so we in statistics, we call this mediation, meaning that there's one factor that's mediating the outcome. That's actually, in other words, that's the way you get there. No, I really don't want to buy your color scheme. Okay, so, and as you can see, what happens here, over time, family functioning, family distress, this is a measure of distress, family distress comes down for both treatments. Don't worry about the numbers, this means this is from a pretty distressed range. The red comes down to 2.3, the yellow comes down to about 2.1 something, a little less than 2.2. Those are well, almost into the normative range, almost. They're actually not bad by the end. There's a little relapse going on in the psychodynamic condition, not all the way, but some worsening in the follow-up. The DBT condition stays about the same. So that means that treating the kid actually improved family functioning quite a bit. 6 months later. And now so does this make sense? So what that means is that if you go at one side, you know, you come at this reciprocal relationship. Okay, I'm done with you. You come at this reciprocal relationship from the perspective of the individual, you can influence the family, and what we also know is that improvements in family functioning predicted and mediated the kid's outcome. So in other words, this is another way of saying, if the family functioning didn't improve when they were in treatment, they were less likely to do well at the end of treatment and more likely to relapse, regardless of which treatment they were in. So actually, family functioning was an enormously important variable in this, even though we didn't go after it in our treatment, okay? And we've got other data, which I won't show you just from as a function of time and so forth, but just so you know that there are very good data. We've now done a couple of studies on this that say that when you also add family interventions to treatment, you get bigger, better, and more enduring outcomes for the individual. Okay? So there's a lot of reasons to think that you being here and families coming to Family Connection, we know from our own data about Family Connections, which I'll show you in a minute, we know that it's good for family members overall. We know that. But there are a lot of other data to say it's not harmful to your loved ones. It's actually good for them too. Okay? And if they're in effective treatment, you know this, that reduces stress in your family, and that's better for your family and for you too. So the nice thing about these reciprocal relationships is that anything you can do to change any part of it has an influence throughout the whole transaction. And so we're going to capitalize on that as often as we can. Okay. All right, so we've got this 12-week, roughly 12-week program. There's a little bit of flexibility around that, depending on your setting. And it includes these 6 modules. The first module is relatively short. It provides a little overview and an introduction to borderline personality disorder, which you'll see is a kind of a prototype for a whole set of problems related to emotion dysregulation, not least of which is suicide and suicide attempts and self-harm. Then now these are named kind of funny, don't worry about the names, because there's this spiral thing going on, so a lot of things show up in one that also show up in the others, but family education, which emphasizes more emphasis on the educational component, although there's education in all the modules. Then we move on to relationship mindfulness and self-management, okay, which is going to come up again and again, but there's an emphasis on it in Module 3. There's an emphasis on general family skills in Module 4, and then validation specific in Module 5, and problem management in Module 6. The modules are not equal in length. Some of them are longer than others, some of them are pretty short, some of them are fairly long. And you'll figure this out as some of you know, because you've been doing it already. Okay, the structure of Family Connections is typically people have opportunities. We make suggestions for people to practice. So whatever we do this week, we want people to practice and then come back with questions, with successes, with failures, with frustrations, with joy, the whole range of things. You know, it's not the case that most things we practice, you know, I don't know about you, but, you know, difficult things that I attempt rarely work the first time. You know, my wife said to me the other day, she was looking through one of those T-shirt catalogs, you know, the things, and one of them said, you know, measure twice, cut once, you know, and this one then went on to say, throw away, find out that it's too short, throw it away, measure 2 more times, go buy another piece, cut again. That's actually probably more like me, okay? Now, and my guess is that I'm probably not alone in that, right? Things that are difficult, you don't just master them the first time. They require a fair amount of practice. And part of that is because of this idea of reciprocity. I might do something different. It may take a while for you to notice that I'm doing something different and start to respond to me differently, which then helps me get better at it. Okay? But it might take a couple of tries before you even notice, or before you settle into a different pattern of responding. So there's lots of opportunities for practice. Some people like the term homework. That's why I put it in quotes. If you don't like the term homework, talk about practice. I tend to call it practice because it emphasizes the doing and not the busy work part of it some people think of with homework. You call it whatever you like, but the idea is that more people can practice, the better. Having said that, if people don't practice, we don't give them a hard time. Everybody's got stress in their lives. Everybody feels pressure. We don't want Family Connections to be another source of pressure for people. We want to provide opportunities to do things that are new, not criticism for not trying things that are new. Okay, so this is not and so as leaders, you're never in the situation of having to get somebody to do practice. That's your job is to create the opportunity for them, and they can do it or not. And if they do it, we want to cheer them on. Whether it's successful or not, we still want to cheer them on. If they don't do it, we want to be interested in, can we help them figure out what's getting in the way? Can we help them have a little less stress so they can have more opportunities to practice? And if they don't want the help, or the help isn't helpful, we just keep moving on. Yeah, 3. Let's give you the mic. Hang on. There we go.
In preparation for taking on this leadership role, I had gone to the weekend before, but I had asked if I could listen in on the Family Connections teleconference while I was using that format. And what was interesting was she did call homework, and the next week a lot of the people had not done it. And so she didn't criticize, but I thought it was interesting to just go out there. She said to them, it's interesting that a lot of you didn't do this exercise. So I want you to realize that how hard it is to do these skills. And think about your loved one and how much we all get upset at them when they're not trying hard enough or they're not following through. And we who do not have these issues didn't do this practice. So I thought that was interesting.
Exactly. And it makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense. It's hard to do new things. Anybody ever fail to exercise on a day that you plan to exercise? Anybody ever do that? Yeah. Okay. Anybody ever fail to decide to exercise because you knew you wouldn't do it? I mean, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. So we're all human beings, and we're trying to provide a caring, supportive environment for making really hard changes, for doing things differently. And the doing things differently is for ourselves primarily. This is a program that is for family members. Because of reciprocity, if it's good for us, it's almost certainly good for our loved ones. Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, I learned a little bit of your techniques with my granddaughter, and it's important to know that it's not always going to work. It's sort of one step forward, maybe a half a step backwards. It takes time. The person who has the illness has to trust you with your new approach. They're going to be looking through for them to be triggered. And it's taken me quite a few years to really find the way to do it. Because it's not one of these things where you can go, 1, 2, 3, this is it. It's not going to work that way.
No, if it were that simple, you wouldn't be here because you would have solved all of the world's problems years ago. Right.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
It's taken me 2 or 3 years to answer it.
Yeah, it's taken me 25, but you know, I'm a slow learner. Okay, so we often start the group with going over this past week's practice. What went well? Where did people get stuck? Sometimes people just want to tell us about it. We want to cheer them on. Sometimes they actually need help. They tried it, it didn't work. How could they try it again and make it a little bit more efficient or more effective? And so there's opportunities for feedback. Okay, and you'll see in a learning model, it's not enough to tell people what to do, to give instructions. You actually also have to give feedback, you know, as the person's doing it. It's not enough to just say, okay, here are the instructions, go do it. Especially in the real world, you've got to try it and then get help from somebody who can observe it to say, well, I'll try it a little bit more this way or a little bit more that way. Then we move on to teaching. And in the teaching context, there's a specific content. That's what's in the manual, either the education or skills. Now here's where we follow, I'm going to suggest that when we think about this from an educational standpoint, that we think about there's 2 ways of learning. There's and one of them we would call cognitive learning. Now you might think, well, cognitive, of course you have to use your thinking to learn. Of course you do. Well, yes and no, okay? We call that top-down learning, or you start with your cortex, you know? You start with your forebrain, the thing that's behind your forehead, right? And then that goes into the rest of your brain. But the other is bottom-up, or more experiential. You start with the doing, the experience of it, which starts lower in the brain, okay, and works its way up to the top of the brain. And it turns out that actually the combination of ultimately having both kinds of learning is going to stick better than probably either by itself, but with difficult, emotionally laden skills, experiential learning is more potent. So if you start with an experience and then an explanation, then the thinking about it, it's probably going to, A, make more sense in a way that they can carry with them, and it's probably going to stick longer. Now, you're going to see the way that I'm going to do that with you is I'm going to use examples and tell you stories and use metaphors. And when I do that, I hope what happens is that in your brain, you're going to have an image. You're going to feel like you're in a situation. It'll remind you of a real situation of your own. And when that happens, you'll have some emotion. And it'll be a little bit different. You're not trying to think about it or learn a concept. You're trying to follow the story and have an experience. And then after we go through the story or the metaphor or the whatever, then we can put some words on what would just happened and what the principles are that will make sense given the experience that we've had. Okay? It's a little bit like swimming. And you know, if you remember when you learned to swim, you know, there's something about that it's hard to explain what it's like to a child in terms of balance in the water. How'd you have, you know, verbally that just doesn't make a lot of sense. But once you're in the water and you've got a small child and you can hold them up, and then as you start to let go, they can start to experience balance in the water. And then you can say things like, you know, put your chin up with some instructions. And you can try that when they're in the water, they can try it and have the experience. If you try to give them a swimming lesson out of the water first, tell them how to do it and throw them in the water, it's not going to go as well. Right? And that's just one person taking care of him or herself. So now notice what I just did. Okay, that was a little. Did anybody get perked up just a tiny little bit about what I said? You know, teach somebody they're in the water, right? Anybody think of the water and maybe a child in the water, right? So that pulled you into the. I hope. Okay, I hope pulled you into the story. And then when I say, you know, which hopefully illustrates the idea that experiential learning is important. That's part of the reason why we don't read the manual. Because when we read the manual or simply give instructions, which is not a bad thing to do with the experiential. In fact, it's essential, but it's not enough by itself. If we only give instructions and explanations, it stays in our cortex. Okay, and it doesn't trickle into the rest of our experience, and our motivation is lower, and our learning is lower. So we want to use a lot of examples and modeling along with the instructions. Now it turns out it doesn't matter which you do first. It doesn't matter whether you give some instructions first and then some examples, or some experiential opportunities first and then some instructions and language about it. It doesn't seem to matter. That's not what I just said is not entirely true. In some it does matter, but for our purposes, we can't tell from topic to topic. So do it the way that makes sense, but try to do it. Now, feel free to use any of my examples or stories. Feel free to use your own. Okay. Again, the reason that the stories and the metaphors aren't in the manual is because they come out of being in the moment and trying to teach this skill in this moment to these people, whatever occurs to us. They're spontaneous. I actually don't plan my stories. I don't. And some of them I've used lots and lots of times, and you probably will hear over and over. And others, they just pop up in that moment because something triggers it. I don't know why. And therefore, sometimes they don't work, by the way. Okay? That's life. You'll tell me, and I'll try again. And that's fine. Okay? This is not about some idea of perfection. Hopefully, you being able to use your own experiences to teach feels empowering to you. And if you're using your own experiences, you're really present in the moment with what you're teaching, that's going to be more compelling to your group, okay, than just reading. Okay. Now again, if you want to use a story or a metaphor of mine, go right ahead, because that's going to make sense to you. It's no longer my story or my metaphor. I just want to point out then it's yours. Okay, it's completely yours at that point because it's coming out of your experience, not mine. Okay, and so that's very important. I don't want you to use a story at a particular point in the teaching because I did it. But if it happens to occur, the same story occurs to you at that point, go right ahead and do it because then it's yours. Or a different story, or something else entirely. That's all fine. Okay. Now, there's also time for sharing and discussion and opportunities to provide support. And part of that is our job is not to say, gee, you know, why don't you two talk because you've got something in common, but it's more modeling being non-judgmental. So, you know, so if somebody comes in, and this happens routinely in Gesundheit, or whatever language you prefer. Fruzzetti, we'll do it in Swedish for you. So say somebody comes in, and in the course of reviewing their practice this week, the person got really judgmental and critical of his or her family member. Okay, which is really not we're trying to not do that. Okay, so rather than, of course the idea is that, did anybody ever get judgmental and critical of anybody you love before? Okay, welcome to the species. Okay, so we're not going to be critical of them. That's great. Let's fight criticism with criticism. That's going to be effective. We're in fact going to try to find in ourselves our non-judgmental, like, interest. Like, okay, it sounds like that didn't go really well. Like, but not in a, like, it's your fault, but like, that must, and like, why didn't it? What got in the way? Not in a challenging way, but in an interested way. Like, well, that must have been a difficult situation. What made it difficult? Okay, then we're modeling staying non-judgmental. We're modeling not blaming. You don't have to telegraph that. You don't have to say, notice everybody, I'm not being judgmental. Just be non-judgmental. They'll have that experience. They'll know about it. And then providing enough structure, okay, which means that we keep moving through the material, but also provide opportunities for discussion and questions and examples and so forth, and practice as we move through it, and pull people in who want to be pulled in, who are willing to be pulled in. So maybe somebody, just doesn't want to participate today. It's just feeling kind of lousy and doesn't want to talk. We let it go. We would hope, we'd say, I hope everything's okay. Maybe we'll come back to you a little later. Not like, come on, you've got to participate. There's no have to. Obviously, people are going to get more out of it if they participate more, if they practice more, and things get in the way. It's hard. We want to provide enough structure so that sometimes in a group, there's a person or a couple of people who are very verbal, for whom it's easy to be verbal. We want to make sure that we provide help to them, but also create room so that other people can participate also. And that usually just means gentle blocking and providing opportunities for other people. Like just saying, oh, hang on a sec, because I think this other person wanted to say something first. And then coming back to that person, but creating space for other people to be able to talk when one person might be more naturally dominating. And by the way, people who are very verbal, it's not a problem, because they often have good stories and good examples and provide opportunities for other people to observe and watch and learn too. So it's not a bad thing. Everybody doesn't have to participate equally. And then of course, we want to make sure that we redirect the discussion when we get off task, or if we're just getting stuck, we do have to finish the program in the time we have, and promote lots and lots of practice. All right, so that's the structure, such as it is fairly minimal, but it does keep things moving. So I just want to ask our esteemed Family Connections leaders, any comments about this piece of it? Because you're experts on this. Yeah, please.
Something that you just said triggered something in my mind. We come as leaders with preconceived notions, and one of my preconceived notions was this sense of fairness in terms of time sharing. So there was my group, and it's almost like I have a little clocker where, we sort of like, so everybody else gets to speak and so on. And of course it didn't work that way, and that created a bit of stress for me. I felt that perhaps people whose requests were a little bit limited or maybe resentful that they couldn't share that much. Until about the fourth or fifth session, where I had a one-on-one good conversation after the group with one of the participants who was perhaps kind of the more silent. And I said, I'm sorry, you didn't really have a lot of opportunity to talk. Are you okay? And when I was saying I'm sorry, I meant I apologize because I can't make it so that you can speak. And she said, no, I really want to talk. I'm fine. I love hearing this and learning so much by listening. And that's when I really learned by experience that some people learn more by sharing and some people learn more by listening. And it's really not enough to make it equal. I mean, of course, you do not really interrupt everybody and give everyone a chance. But, people will participate to the level of their comfort. And so, not really.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing we felt with them, and I don't think we ever talked about it, is the balance between hearing their stories, which can be immense and take up a tremendous amount of time, and then getting through to, because people struggle with these skills. And one of the things we've kind of done, we have a point where we at the beginning we do share where we are, what we did to get there. And through the course, we'll have it work in small groups on activities where we get more of that. But in terms of the large group, we try to keep the focus if they bring something that's happened, keep it relevant to the content for that week. And that seems to keep the focus. So if someone's saying, well, last week this happened, try to have that support come in terms of what we're working on skill-wise. And I think other leaders, I think, have wrestled with the problem of telling tales. And we have amazing tales. Amazing tales. And also getting the help that we actually select.
Rosanna, did you have a question? Or?
No, I didn't understand because my English is
Ah, okay.
some difficult.
We'll catch up. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, sure. He's got the mic right behind you. There you go.
When I first took the course, there were some people on it. I felt like the group was in very different places.
Yeah.
And there were some people on there that I think that didn't know anything about the disease and also never really talked about it.
Right.
And one of the concerns I have, and I think you guys just touched on it, is somebody who you see so desperately needs to say it. How do you gently kind of, because I felt a couple of people, Marie Paul did a wonderful job of kind of keeping it on task, but some of these people so desperately needed to talk. I'm a little concerned that cutting them off maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Right. So the question is this idea of group management when maybe somebody in the group feels a lot. This is a new opportunity to actually talk with people who understand, and how lovely is that? On the one hand, it's great. On the other hand, if we only do that, there's no opportunity to actually do the education and skill part. And I think that's where the skill leader, the group leaders have to strike a balance and maybe give that person who is benefiting him or herself from it a little more room to do that, but also if by the second, third week there's a little bit more domination of that, they might want to catch them afterwards and say, be very validating about it and say, and I wonder if you could, and then give some hint at what you're looking for, like be a little more efficient in your description. It's really important to hear from you. We care about it, but we also want to make sure there's enough time to do other things, and so forth. And remind them that they can repeat the program. People can go through the program more than once. There's no cost to this. This is a grassroots program. We offer the training for free. That you offer the groups for. This is a true grassroots kind of thing. Yeah, Perry, use the microphone though. Oh. They're not going to, unfortunately, I don't know what to do when there's when they can't hear me? They can't hear me. Oh, I don't know what to do about that. My microphone says, Alyssa says I can hear you. Oh, okay.
I can just switch
I guess I can do that. See if that makes a difference. Is that working?
Test. Yeah. Maria's the only one that can't hear. She's the only one that can't hear. Okay. So, should we switch or? So, I'll switch it back. Because you prefer this one, right?
Yeah. This way. Okay, so yeah, hang on one second. Let me just. We're going to stop for a break in just a few minutes. So if for bathrooms and everything, and coffee and food. So in maybe 15 minutes or so. It's fine to get up and go use the toilet too, but I'm just letting you know, I'm not planning on waiting till noon to stop. So, yeah, Marie Paul, go ahead.
So on the issue of group management, because I know that's often an issue, I use a couple of additional little tips. The first one is somebody has a hard connection story is at some point you interrupt with some validation. Something like, oh wow, this is really hard. I can see how difficult this is. And I have a quick question for you. So now if you say I have a quick question for you, you're sending a message that you're expecting a quick answer. And you keep the question really tiny, like when was the last time that there was a big crisis in the house? So the answer is a day. And then you say, all right, thank you. Well, we'll talk more.
Now, Marie Paul's a master at this because notice what she's doing. She's actually using skills to distract away from the emotion of the story and helping the person get back into the group. Hang on, just
there's a break that we could, at some point when there's a break, we could sort of take our personal time and say, maybe it would be good for you to be involved in this group at the same time.
Sure.
To make that connection. Because you can get support in education and education, you get a different kind of support in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of resources.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
I was just going to say maybe we'll cover this later to come to the group management, but I've got two different experiences that probably are the two things I need to priority here. One, I was at the same meeting and there was a woman whose daughter had, turned into the street meal. Our hearts went out to her, but I wouldn't know that the woman was clearly getting more and more anxious and talking faster, and we're not trained professionals, so I love your idea about the first question. And then also when my daughter was in Utah, we don't know the people that are in the program. There was a woman who literally, the bulk of the meeting folks raised their hand, well, this kid's a parent, she's your problem, everybody deal with that. And what do you do when you get, one hand was kind of emotional, but with someone that needs to be careful that maybe will do other things. And two, if you get someone who is so burned out and PTSD that all they're doing is taking care of, this is a hard, this is never going to work.
Right.
So
Okay. Well, we will a little bit, but you're bringing it up now. So in the spirit of how we handle things, let's take it up now, and we'll take it up again later too. So I think they're actually two slightly different things. Okay. One is that occasionally, and this actually doesn't happen very often, and Perry could tell us how often it happens, but sometimes there's someone in the group who really needs treatment, who really needs professional help, and that a skill and education and support group isn't enough. Now, in those cases, we want to provide them resources to help them get that help that they need. And then the question is, can they do that concurrently to staying in Family Connections, or should they do that for a month or two and then join the next group? Okay? And that's something that you would just discuss in a very, just with them alone, not with the whole group, but discuss with them in a just honest way. Like, it seems like this is really hard, and this, this is not treatment. This is not treatment for you. This is it's help. It's skills and support and education. And if they're going to get treatment, do they want to take a shot at that for a while first and then come back to the next group, or do they think that they can rely on treatment for pulling together some of the problems they're having, and then use the group for education, skills, and support? And then I think, I don't know, Perry, like 2 times or something in years. Yeah, it's.
The other thing I just wanted to sort of comment on, when you brought it up, that the situation that seems so difficult and you don't have the answers for, you're not there to have answers. What you're there for is to help someone be able to tolerate their own feelings, regardless of what the situation is. And I think you have to be very careful you don't get pulled into, well, give me advice, how shall I handle this? It's not about that. It's how can I sustain myself while I'm going through X, Y, and Z crises.
Right. What's the mantra?
We're not therapists.
We're not therapists.
We cannot change your loved one. We
That's right.
for yourself. And collaterally, you get really positive results.
That's right. So
That's our mantra.
what Ann's saying is so important. The target of Family Connections is not directly family, the loved one who's suicidal or whatever problems there are. It's not directly. There's indirect help for them. They're not coming, this program. It's directly for family members to manage themselves, to have a better quality of life, which in turn gives them skills that are good for the family member. And as I said, there's good evidence for that. There's very good evidence for that. So that's it's a helpful thing. We're not trying to help you. We're not your coach to help you so you can help your family member. We're here to help you help yourself. Yep.
Normally, when something comes up like that, of course I talk to family and family, I normally say, oh, this is your situation, and I'll usually turn it over to the group, and I'll say, has anybody else ever experienced this?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to answer it myself, let the
Right.
group answer it if they can.
And I would simply add, in Family Connections, what I would say is, anybody ever handled this skillfully? What skills did you use? The emphasis is on the skills, because otherwise, and this is really important, and I'm going to talk about this a couple times, there's a difference between giving advice and helping somebody use a skill. There's a big difference, and we actually are trying to not give any advice in this program. Advice, put a big red line through it, you know. This is not about advice. We don't want to give advice. I don't want to give you advice. I don't want you to give anybody, and we don't want them looking for advice. You can get that from your grandparents, okay? If you're lucky enough that they're still alive. You know, what we want is to empower people with skills. Skills create choices, right? If you have the skill to do something, you have the choice to use it. Doesn't mean you will, but you have the ability and the choice to use it. If you don't have the skill, you can't do it, right? If I take my, you know, well, my kids can all swim now, but like take a 2-year-old and bring them to the pool, throw them in the water over their head, they don't have any choice but to go glug, 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 right? Okay, if they have the skill of swimming or floating, they can swim or float. They're probably going to do one of those and not go glug, 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 okay? So, but skills create choices, and they create opportunities for better outcomes. They don't guarantee them, but they create those opportunities. So that's a very good point. But we want to keep coming back to what skills. So that's a great question, by the way. This, you know, when somebody's going and say, you know, this sounds like an awful situation, other things you can say just while we're on the topic. One is, you know, unfortunately, the things that seems like would be most helpful, we're not going to get to those for a couple of weeks. So maybe at the break we can talk about just how to hang in there for a couple of weeks until we get there, okay? And I'm not only saying that if you'd say that if that were true, I'm not saying to put them off just to stop them, but to let them know help is coming, but we're not right there yet. And sometimes, because of the nature of the group, we could say, you know, that's actually something we're going to talk about today. So let's, rather than struggle with just only feeling supportive and validating of what's going on for you, which I think we're all feeling, let's move on and get to our new skills and then come back to how you could use some of the skills we're going to talk about today. So, and both of those are very helpful and very respectful ways of diverting away from kind of getting stuck. Yeah.
Real quick, as we undertake this leadership role, if we find ourselves in the middle of a course, is there any resource available to us if we find that we're really stuck?
Oh, there are all kinds. We'll talk about this, but in short, there's a regular call-in with James Rosser, who unfortunately has an ear infection. He lives in Los Angeles, and he provides a call-in where Family Connections leaders, there's a fixed time. You can call in with questions and struggles and things like that are non-emergency. So he couldn't be here because he couldn't get on a plane with his ear infection. But you'll meet him electronically in some version. And then anytime you have an emergency, you can call other Family Connection leaders as mentors. You can call Perry. You can call or email me. I mean, What I would suggest if it's an emergency is you send it out to anybody you know and take the first bit of help you can get. But there's lots of help available. You're not out there on your own. Okay, now group leaders, just to be clear, everybody, we're working in at least in pairs typically, and everybody who's a group leader has either gone through Family Connections or something similar, an NAMI program or other program first, or are professionals that have training in some of the same content. And family members are then recommended for leader training. So if you're here as a family member, it's because somebody's recommended you. And then, of course, we have this leader training, which we're talking about. You'll have all these things. You'll have the teaching notes. You'll have the ongoing support, mentoring. Supervision is much too strong a word, but it's opportunities to get peer supervision from mentors or professionals, anybody you want. There's lots of help available. And just on that note, there are also other resources. For example, some of you are readers. You like to read stuff. We can keep you busy reading for at least a couple of years with research articles and book chapters and books if you want them. If you're not a reader, no reading is required, okay? So this is, you know, you want to have more information, you like to get it that way, great. If you don't, no pressure. There's nothing you need to know that's not in the manual, okay? So just to be clear, some people like to, some people don't. We also, so far, have one small set of role plays on video. And they are, so far, all we have are me doing role plays with some with Marie Paul and some with Sarah Larson who plays my daughter. And so we have these role plays, and they're short, invalidating, ineffective examples, things that we can all relate to, right? And that they didn't go well because I'm not using any skills, okay? And then redos, where I try to be more skillful and demonstrate what a skillful response might look like. Also, we have a whole group of Family Connections leaders putting together another set of role plays. I hope maybe within a year or so, we'll have some other kinds of resources like that are available. So there's lots and lots of resources. Now, this is a place where you think about, as you're teaching, what would help you? What would actually help you be more effective in your group? And if there's something you think would be more helpful, ask for it. And, you know, the wheels of change move slowly, but it might be that miraculously a year later, we have it. Okay, now a year might seem like a long time until you've been doing it for 10 years. Then it seems fast, but, you know, we do the best we can. So, but if you've got ideas about what would be helpful, please ask. We also have some videos, specific videos of other people teaching certain skills. So if you wanted just to have a little break from your teaching and show a 20-minute, 30-minute clip of somebody else teaching a skill, like Marshall Linehan teaching one of our skills, or see a little clip of me teaching one of our skills. That's all we've got at the moment, but we can develop others of those as well. Okay, so lots and lots of other things there. All right, now, what else? Blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, we just talked about all this. Not a therapist, don't need to worry. Lots more opportunities for more training. Great. All right, so let me just tell you very briefly, because you might be interested and your family members might be interested about the data. So far, we've got these 3 published studies, 2 that Perry and I have done and 1 independently. All show quite similar results, significant improvements. They look like this. The very first study, which by the way is when nobody was very good at this, okay? I mean, we all get better over time, I think. And this was the first study. Family Connections leaders in this case had never been through Family Connections themselves because there hadn't been any Family Connections themselves. So this was like real cold startup. We had 44 families in 3 sites, about 2/3 women, 1/3 men, mostly parents, but some spouses or partners. And what we found was, well, these were average age about 55, relatives average. These averages are very misleading, right? Because a mean age of relatives is 25 with a standard deviation of 10. That just means that 2/3 of the relatives were between 15 and 35. That's all that means, and that means that there's another 1/3 who are younger or older. But a lot of years in treatment for the relatives, you know, 8 years in treatment on average. Interesting, even though it was our first time, people attended almost all the time, 10 sessions out of 12, and almost 90% completed the program. This is extremely encouraging. I mean, programs like this typically hit 50% completion with 50% dropout, and so this is really nice. There's something good happening here. People want to come back, are able to continue. So that's nice. What we see, again, my slides aren't showing up very well, but on the paper you can see grief. Grief is an interesting variable to measure. Like, think of this as like, this isn't the life that I wanted. This isn't the life for my child that I wanted or my other loved one that I wanted. And grief went down precipitously between before Family Connections to after. And then our hypothesis was, gee, because this is a skill-based program, if they continue to use skills, things ought to continue to get better. And then look at the follow-up period, okay, which was 6 months later, actually continue to make improvements. So grief is going down. And I want to actually say that the grief at the end here is still above the normal range, okay? These are still people with loved ones who are struggling, but it's so much better, okay? And of course they would still have more grief than somebody, than if they hadn't, that their relative weren't struggling with whatever problems they have. Of course, more than a family with a teenager who's actually doing really well and doesn't have any mental health problems. Of course, there's more grief there. But this is much, much closer to the normal range, starting to get actually quite close to the normal range, and is much better than before. In terms of distress and depression, we see the same thing. That we had a couple of measures of this, but again, big changes from before, from pre-Family Connections to post, and continued small improvements later on. The same thing with burden. The idea of burden is that if you've got a loved one who's suffering, that's often experienced as a burden. It's a burden emotionally. It's a burden practically. Like, can I go away from for the weekend and leave my loved one at home by him or herself? Can I not answer my phone tonight and just turn my phone off and watch a movie? Or what if? You know, there's a burden in that sense. It's an emotional burden, it's a practical burden. And as you can see from the data, the burden comes down as well from before Family Connections to after, and then again in the follow-up. Again, from very high, outrageously high rates to rates that are only higher than normal, not dramatically higher than normal. Question?
Since there are so many health professionals in here, I just wanted to mention these cards and everything that you're talking about. I think, when I watched David Davidson's video, and she touched upon it too in her session, that I think for the health professionals to understand, grief is a huge part of it. And no one ever told me that. I actually brought it up in my own therapy session when I was going through a crisis with my daughter, is that we were going along, and we just started, kids were teenagers, and we just started to go away together as a couple, and all of a sudden this hit. And this life that you think that you're going to lead is gone. And grief was set in, and it's just, your whole expectations change. Everyone around you is talking about, what colleges you're visiting, and, all these other things, and you're just like, what's that big ignorance that I got into? And you can't talk about it. And the thing that Debbie had mentioned, which was true, she had cancer at the time, and she taught this class, everyone rallies around you when you have a physical illness, but nobody comes to your aid when your child has a mental illness. There's no visual of, my daughter.
Yeah, there are taboos, yeah.
Very much taboos. No one knows how to help it, so it's a very isolating thing to have a child with mental illness. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share that, because I was a perfect parent until I had children. I know that saying. And I think there are many health professionals here that not even have a child, never mind a loved one with mental illness. So
Right.
it's very easy to judge us and to judge people. So, but these things are huge. I'm sitting here with my phone on silent,
Right.
because
There's a hypervigilance. There's a
life is
hypervigilance.
changed,
Sure.
your life is changed forever.
Right.
I just wanted to-
That's right. We want to make it, you know, you said it's easy to judge. We want to make it easier not to judge ourselves and other people, but in particular ourselves. That's part of our goal, is to make it easier not to.
Alan, what Doreen just said is actually something key to what people bring into the very, very first session. And that the child, their loved one, was a perfectly normal person on the outside, everyone else is going to college, and it's a terribly difficult thing to grasp. And you mentioned metaphors. One metaphor, and might as well pass along to kids if you have them. One metaphor we pass along has been very helpful, and also has been very amusing to people, is imagine your loved one with a traffic cone on their head. And every time you see them, you see the traffic cone. Because if someone has a disability and can't walk, or someone has a disability of some other kind of visual or something, which you can't see, and this little bit of help, and go, oh yeah, they are looking at the whole traffic cone. And so help you see them.
I just wanted to add something about the grief part. And I think it's just, many of the questions that I came to have with hospitalization, had said this to me early on, and I thought it was fearful, but now I know that the emphasis, take a vacation when the child in the hospital.
Take a vacation when your child is in the hospital. Right.
And you would
It's like when you got an infant, take a nap when your child's sleeping. Don't clean the house while your child is sleeping. Right.
And no,
Yeah.
she doesn't take a vacation.
That's right. 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 Absolutely.
Hi there. I actually worked with DBT and the other side, technical side for a long time, and then pretty familiar with the martial breakdown model. And one of the things that I always found extraordinary and interesting is the idea of the borderline person to understand, you know, it's not all about me. You know, in fact, the skills that are taught to people who are in court are how to express their needs to another person, you know, how to get them to listen. And there really isn't very much about how to listen to, for instance, to that family member and the impact of the behaviors that and a lot of skills are, you know, just a question. You know, they as someone in person is always going to be there. Because, hey, I have another daughter who's getting married.
Mhm.
And I just think it's, you know, it's one of the things that makes it such a struggle for family members, even if they have, you know, a loved one who's in prison with a great
Sure. Right. The impact on others is enormous. It's a tricky issue, but of course the idea here is to help us find ways to do both, to actually take a vacation in a way that isn't destabilizing and so scary to the other person that your vacation is ruined. Okay? And that's part of it. We'll talk about the change part of that, how to do that whenever possible, but also the acceptance. Sometimes it doesn't work, and that's really tricky. All right, just to flip it, the other piece of data, just linking in the other direction, is it's not just that things that are painful go down, but actually the sense of mastery and empowerment go up. They go up from before family connections to after, and then continue going up into the follow-up period. So this is I personally find this one to be the one that's really hopeful. Not that it's not hopeful to imagine burden going down, that's nice, but it's more like a relief. But the idea that mastery and empowerment can go back up, like I can get my life back, or at least a big piece of my life back, I think that's empowering, that's hopeful, and I want to emphasize that to you. I think that's really important. All right, just so you know, this has been replicated twice, one of ours and somebody else's, and these are all published, one in the Journal of Mental Health and the other in the Archives of Suicide Research. So these are you know, these are good studies, real people, the kinds of folks that we're talking about. We don't have a randomized trial. Very hard to do a randomized trial here. There's one, I think, in process in the University of Minnesota. I'm not sure what that's going to tell us that's different, but it's important to have randomization to see what goes on. So the data are really quite solid, and I don't know, we're just very optimistic about it. All right, so any questions about the data? This is sort of the end of our introduction to leader training. We're going to come, don't forget, we're going to come back to many of these issues and hit on them again as we go through today and tomorrow. But what we've just done is more background for you, and then we'll pick up in a minute. We'll take a break and we'll come back and pick up where we started in the manual itself. But so I just want to know, are there any questions? Just ready to go? Got the data? Got the stance? Understand what's expected? Hopefully feel supported? And get some coffee. Okay, so let's take a 15-minute break, and we'll pick up with Module 1.